Minigames have now become a permanent fixture within the Final Fantasy franchise, and it's not too uncommon for them to end up being some of the more talked about parts of the experience for reasons that are both good and bad. Such has been their prominence that it's often easy to forget that in the earlier days of the franchise, their usage was actually pretty sparse, but this all changed with the release of Final Fantasy VII. It featured a whole host of minigames, and some of them were so good, like the bike chase after escaping from the Shinra Tower, that they even ended up becoming standalone games. The response to the famed squat challenge appearing in the recent Final Fantasy VII Remake trailer also showed just how much gamers have enjoyed the experiences that minigames have offered over the years, and the sense of satisfaction that was granted after overcoming these ego-fueled challenges and subsequently obtaining any rare items they protected cannot be understated. But for all those good experiences that have left positive, lasting impressions, there have been plenty of rage-inducing ones, where the challenge was just beyond the realm of fun, and the horror of attempting to persevere has been etched in our memories forever. And they are the ones we're going to be covering today. So here are the 7 hardest minigames from the Final Fantasy franchise that we hope to never have to play again. And we're going to kick things off with the notorious Chocobo racing in Final Fantasy X, specifically the Catch a Chocobo race. After progressing pretty far within the main storyline of Final Fantasy X, the Celestial Weapons pop up as something you probably want to consider acquiring if you're wanting to tackle some of the end game content. They acted as the game's ultimate weapons, giving unimaginable strength to the characters who were lucky enough to wield them. But simply obtaining the weapons wasn't enough, as there were also associated crests and sigils that needed to be acquired before each weapon could achieve maximum potential. The weapons themselves and their associated crests were pretty straightforward to obtain, but the sigils were much more challenging for numerous reasons. For example, there was a 50% chance of Wakka's sigil appearing as a prize for winning a Blitzball tournament, but only after all 3 of Wakka's overdrives have also been obtained via the same method. It was a time-consuming endeavour that would no doubt have also caused some degree of frustration, but it paled in comparison to what was required to obtain Tidus's Sun Sigil. Within the Calmlands, you could take part in Chocobo racing. There were quite a few different races to take part in, each with their own unique rewards and challenges, but the hardest variant was called the Catch a Chocobo. It acted as a combination of all of the challenges faced in the previous races, like dodging seagulls, but it also added in the requirement of catching balloons that were scattered across the racecourse. Catching balloons served to decrease your race time, and to obtain the Sun Sigil, you needed to complete the race with a time of less than 0 seconds. It was incredibly frustrating, as not only did you have to contend with the various obstacles, but there were quite a few glitches present in this minigame too. Still, it is possible. There just might be a few curses happening along the way. As a side note, yes, we could have included the Lightning Bolt mini challenge in the Thunder Plains, but as time has gone on, there are now viable strategies available that make the bolt much more predictable due to a glitch that people have found. I've put a link in the description below to a guide if you're still struggling with this particular challenge. With Final Fantasy VII, as mentioned, there were a ridiculous amount of minigames. They ranged from performing CPR to try and save Priscilla after the fight against Bottomswell, through to dressing up as a Shinra infantryman to take part in the Junin Parade. Quite a few of these minigames ended up being housed at the Gold Saucer, where you could purchase GP in order to play them and try and win prizes. There were tons of things on offer here, including Omnislash, but while many of them were quite difficult, none of the minigames compared to the 3D Battler, which is impossible to beat through conventional means. Within this particular challenge, you are squared up against an opponent to fight in a duel. But it's essentially a glossy looking version of rock, paper, scissors. You can perform 3 types of punch: high, medium, and low. And depending on how your opponent responds, your punch will either succeed, fail, or get cancelled out. There are 5 different levels of opponent that you can face, with the first being the girl in pink. Within each fight, there is an approximate chance of winning as the AI adapts to your progress. There's around a 90% chance that you'll be able to beat the girl in pink, but this decreases to 70% for the next fight, to 15% for the fight after, and down to only 10% for the 4th fight. What becomes even more complicated is that these battles are consecutive, so in reality, the chance of playing and beating the 4th opponent is only around 0.9%, or less than 1 in 100. If you are able to achieve this feat though, you will get the chance to square off against the 5th opponent, who was made impossible to beat, as in literally impossible. Not only is this fighter invisible, but no matter what you did, you would be unable to land a hit due to how it was programmed. One move would ensure you get hit, while the other 2 would result in a block or a draw. They just never disclosed this, so anyone playing would have always had the hope that the invisible fighter could be beaten, which was rather cruel. Either way, when you inevitably lost to the invisible fighter, you would be rewarded with 300 GP, but it was of scant consolation for the pain and anguish that would have been suffered by completionists back in the day. Final Fantasy IX was another game that had numerous minigames, including Tetramaster, which acted as a follow-up to the wildly successful Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII. Achieving Master Collector rank within this particular game, which required you to have 100 A-level cards, was a serious feat in itself. But for our next relentlessly hard minigame, we're going to actually put the spotlight on racing Hippaul in Alexandria. This minigame could be played at the beginning of Disc 3, when you are in control of Vivi and are walking around Alexandria, and on the surface, this game seems quite straightforward. As Vivi, you just have to race against Hippaul by pressing alternate buttons, and the quicker you do it, the faster Vivi will run. It's identical to running in athletics games like the classic Daley Thompson's Decathlon, or more recently, Sonic and Mario at the Olympic Games. At the beginning of this minigame, Hippaul is so slow it's almost embarrassing, and it shouldn't pose any real problems. The challenge comes from the fact that after every single defeat, Hippaul levels up, becoming a little bit faster, and he then gears up for you to challenge him all over again. If you've got the time, there are quite a few Tetramaster cards available as rewards if you continue to beat Hippaul, with a new card obtained every 10 levels. The main reason to keep playing though comes if you're able to beat Hippaul at level 80, as after crossing the finish line first, you will be granted the Athlete Queen, a key item that acts as proof of the achievement. You'd be forgiven for wanting to stop there, but should you want to continue, then Hippaul is up for the challenge, as there are another 19 races available, each harder than the last. There's no reward for beating Hippaul at level 99, other than satisfaction, but doing so is certainly no easy feat, and even Sibylium, who wrote the guide for this minigame on GameFAQs, admitted that he capped out at level 80. It is possible though, as shown by a YouTuber known as Akumaku, but they were only able to beat Hippaul at level 99 by using a Trust Predator USB controller, which has built-in turbo functionality and macros. When Final Fantasy IV released on the Nintendo DS in 2007, it featured a whole host of changes, and one of the more interesting elements was the inclusion of minigames, as the original game featured none. The developers no doubt had to try and think of fun and interesting ways to incorporate the stylus and touchpad functionality, and that's when they came up with Wit, Rydia's brand new personal Eidolon. Unlike the other Eidolons in Final Fantasy IV, Wit is pretty unique. Not only can you create a customized face for the little guy, but you can also dress him up in cool costumes, and perhaps most importantly, you can increase his stats by achieving high scores in 5 brand new minigames. Achieving 9,999 points would also grant an X potion, as well as some other consumable prizes. Each minigame was associated with one of the game's main protagonists. There was Rydia's Math Magic Minute, which tested intelligence by asking you to solve timed math problems. Cecil's Goblin Gauntlet tested strength by getting you to tap the screen to attack incoming goblins. Kane's High Jump Hijinks tested stamina by getting you to spin the stylus round in a circle on the screen as quickly as possible for 10 seconds to help Kane jump as high as possible. And Edge's Ninja Blade Glade tested speed. It was similar to Goblin Gauntlet, but introduced a more time-based element. None of them held a candle though to Rosa's Measured Meditations, which aptly tested spirit. Within this minigame, you had to place the stylus down on the touchscreen and pick it up as close as possible to the indicated time. If you picked it up within 2 seconds, you would score 100 points. But by picking it up at the exact right time, you would net 4,000 points. It sounds very straightforward, but the clock associated with the minigame wasn't based on real time, so gauging when to pick the stylus up was actually rather challenging. The pro tip was to instead use a real stopwatch to narrow down the time window and achieve perfection. If you'd like to try this for yourself, you just have to make sure you pick up the original Nintendo DS version of Final Fantasy IV, as WIT was removed from subsequent re-releases on iOS, Android, and PC. With Final Fantasy X featuring some pretty brutal minigames, it was no surprise that its sequel, Final Fantasy X-2, decided to carry on the tradition. This saw the creation of a third-person shooter minigame called Gunner's Gauntlet, a new puzzle game called Sphere Break, and Blitzball was even brought back, but as a management simulator. Each of them were challenging in their own way, but no minigame in X-2 made blood boil quite like the tower recalibration in the Thunder Plains. And it's always made me think that perhaps they didn't feel gamers had suffered enough when attempting to dodge the 200 lightning strikes. Anyway, there are 10 towers in the Thunder Plains that need to be recalibrated. To accomplish this, you have to enter a series of 30 randomly generated commands, but you can only make 3 mistakes with each tower before it resets and you have to try again. It sounds very simple on paper, but there are numerous things to consider. Not only does the challenge become harder with each completed tower, but there are also 3 separate minigames to master, one for each character. Riku has Appear and Disappear, which is used for towers 1, 4, and 7. In this game, buttons appear on the screen for a brief moment and you have to press the combination before the time runs out. To make this more challenging, the location of the buttons changes with each tower and the time allowed for input also decreases. New buttons are also added to make it more complicated, with Tower 7 even requiring the player to press 2 buttons simultaneously. Pain had a variant of this called Avalanche, which was used for towers 2, 5, and 8. This saw commands fall from the top of the screen, and at the halfway point, one of them would subtly flash. You then had to press this button before it fell to the bottom of the screen, and to make this harder, the speed of the drop increased and additional buttons were also added. Now both of these minigames were challenging, but compared to Yuna's Forgotten Memories minigame, which was used for towers 3, 6, 9 and 10, they were pretty easy. Within Yuna's game, you had to repeat a button sequence that flashed up on the screen within the allotted time period. It starts off with only 2 buttons, but this increased to 6 buttons for the final tower, and the range of buttons also increased. What made this particularly horrible though, was that for Tower 10, the 6 buttons it told you needed to be repeated in reverse order, and that was no easy feat given the time restrictions. Outside of just having a great short-term memory able to compute that level of information, the easiest method people found to accomplish this was to enlist a friend to write the buttons down and then repeat them. What's weird about this challenge is that it's so difficult, yet there's absolutely no impact on your completion score. So if you want to do it, good luck. Now, even though the earlier Final Fantasy games often didn't feature minigames, Final Fantasy I was something of an exception, as it housed within a secret minigame that could only be played after acquiring the ship. After you set sail, the minigame could be accessed by holding down the A button and then proceeding to press the B button 55 times. If you did it right, this would launch a variant of the famed 15 puzzle. Within the original game, completing the puzzle offered a rather paltry 100 gil, but within subsequent versions of the game, more legitimate prizes were added that could be obtained, but only if you were able to complete the 15 puzzle within certain time limits. The most challenging of times was to finish a random configuration within only 30 seconds, a significant feat. Within the Origins version, if this was achieved, you would obtain 10,000 gil, while in Dawn of Souls, it would grant you an X potion and Mega Elixir. For our final minigame, we're going to double dip, and that means venturing back to the fantastical world of Final Fantasy IX, and Alexandria is again the stage. Right at the beginning of the game, while you are in control of Vivi wandering around the streets, you can approach two girls with a jump rope to gain access to the jump rope challenge. As a side note, you can also undertake this challenge later in the game too after the bell tower moves, and here Aiko can have a go. The premise of the challenge is simple. You just have to get Vivi or Aiko to jump at the right time so the rope doesn't hit them. The difficulty comes from the fact that it's really hard to consistently achieve consecutive jumps, as the speed keeps changing after certain milestones to make the timing either faster or slower. There are rewards for completing 20 jumps, 50 jumps, as well as 100, 200, and even 300 jumps. But these just act as a teaser, as there's a key item and a trophy available for those who are able to perform 1,000 jumps in a row. Something that actually takes around 7 minutes of consistent focus. This minigame is notorious for being devilishly punishing, and Kazuhiko Aoki, who was the event designer on Final Fantasy IX, even noted that he cheated by using a debug and still only managed to get around 100 consecutive jumps. He joked that nobody working on the game ever managed to hit the 1,000 jump milestone, but if they had, he would have scolded them for practicing instead of working. Such is the difficulty surrounding this particular challenge that some gamers have even created scripts to do it for them. One involves using the Cronus Max controller, while others found another way, which involved downloading Remote Play for their PlayStation 4 and running a script on their PC. Using these techniques, it's also been revealed that the maximum number of jumps that can be performed before the game can't handle it anymore is 8,388,607, and I really wouldn't recommend trying to repeat that. Anyway, with that last minigame finished up, we are at the end of this list. So yeah, there were 7 incredibly hard minigames that we hope to never have to play again. Hopefully you guys found the list really interesting. If you did, then please consider hitting that like button, subscribing to our channel if you haven't done so already, and hitting the bell so you get notified immediately when we publish new content. And if you have the time, be sure to let us know in the comments how you got on with these minigames, or to let us know if you feel there's any we missed out. Alright guys, this is Daryl signing out. I'd like to extend a big thank you to all our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.